and let's get started. Good morning.
Good morning. All right. Well, thank you for being here with us this morning. I know we've some of you can't stay the whole time, and I understand that. Elizabeth did put the link to the recording in the chat, so that you will find that quite easily. I'm Liz. I'm with Young and Healthy. I coordinate the education and volunteer programs at Young and Healthy. My background is child psychology with a child development, adolescent development emphasis. And I'm just so happy to be here. But this is like my favorite day of the week is Thursday, because I get to be here with all of you. So as we get started, I am going to put a link to our virtual sign-in sheet. I am putting that in the chat, dropping that in the chat right now. So please click on that link, and you will see the sign-in sheet and be able to sign in so that you can be with us and let us know that we're here. And then the course number is 3104, because the sign-in sheet will ask you for the course number. So that's 3104. Okay, let's really get rolling now. And I want to just tell you that Young and Healthy is a 31-year-old direct healthcare service organization that provides direct healthcare services to kids through all volunteer medical professionals who see our kids in their offices pro bono. So our kids can go and get the medical care they need. They can get glasses. They can get their teeth cleaned and filled. They can get a cast if they need it. They can, whatever they might need is all provided by volunteer medical professionals, and nobody gets a bill, not Young and Healthy, not the family, all donated services. And then we also have an expert on our staff who provides insurance enrollment and support. He helps families to figure out what their best option is for insurance enrollment, and then helps us to navigate it, because it's hard. It can be really hard to use your health insurance. And he's an expert at answering all of those questions. So we're really fortunate to have him. And then we have our prevention, because we know that preventing kids from getting sick means that we're going to do better all the way around. So our prevention programs are really important. And so we have our trauma-informed care and mindfulness, because we know that taking care of our brain, taking care of our body, our emotional needs, our emotional health directly relates to our physical health. And so that is very important to us. And then, of course, the parent education component, which is how I get to be here with all of you this morning. So we're still doing our work at Young and Healthy the same way all of you are trying to figure this out every day. So are we. We are back in the office, most of us anyway. And one of the projects that we're getting ready to do, to work on, to gear up for, is our TOMA program, which helps families to access the earned income tax credit on when they file their taxes. So I know it's only September, but we all know, right? Tax season will be here soon. So keep that in your mind, that if you are eligible for that, Young and Healthy is more than happy to help you to file your taxes in a way that so you can get that money back. And it can be up to about $7,000. So it can make a difference. All right, let's start with a quick breathing exercise, because I like to start getting us all in this learning space, right? The listening space that we're in. So the first thing I'm going to ask you to do is just get comfortable wherever you are. Maybe you're standing, maybe you're listening and doing something else, making dinner. Stop for a second. Get kind of connected to where you are. And I'm going to ask you to breathe in through your nose for a count of 1, 2, 3, 4. And now hold that breath. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And exhale through your mouth. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. One more time. In through your nose for 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Exhale. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So breathing, mindful breathing, which is what we just did, is a really great way to calm your brain, lower your heart rate, get your brain ready to learn, get in that space. It also helps you if you need to do a reset, if you need to press the pause button and just make everything stop for a second so that you can be responsive instead of reactive. We're going to talk a little bit more about that, but that's a really great breathing exercise that you can keep in your tool belt in your pocket. And if you need it, you can pull it out and just do it wherever you are, whatever you're doing. So what is emotional intelligence? Emotional intelligence is that capacity that we have so that we're aware of, we can control, and we can express our emotions, right? Because that helps us to handle our interpersonal relationships with judiciousness, means with attention, with attentiveness, and with empathy, right? And it really is, being an emotionally intelligent person is really the key to personal and professional success. And if you're a student, it's also the key to academic success. We're going to talk about why and how our brains develop so that you have an understanding of how can being aware of your emotions make you a better student? How can being aware and be able to control your emotions make you a better professional or a better mom or dad or a better friend, right? Being able to do all these things makes that difference in your life. And so we're going to talk about first we're going to talk about what the key elements are. Key elements are self-awareness, right? Being aware of your own emotions, self-regulation, being able to control your behavior around those emotions. We don't think emotions aren't bad, right? There's no such thing as a good or a bad emotion. We all have emotions that they come and they go, right? They're with us. What we do with those emotions, how we behave in response to those emotions is self-regulation. Motivation is part of emotional intelligence, being able to get things done, to do things, right? An understanding that things need to get done plays into motivation. Empathy, we're going to definitely talk about empathy, which is the ability to make someone else feel felt, right? So that I get you, I see you, I understand you, I feel you, right? That's empathy. And then having social skills, it plays into emotional awareness and self-regulation. The social skills will help play into the emotional intelligence. So what is resilience? Resilience is what we're building when we build our emotional awareness and control. So it's an adaptive response in the face of significant adversity. And right, no question, we are all experiencing significant adversity in the wake of this worldwide pandemic, right? There's no aspect of our lives really that hasn't been touched, that hasn't faced some kind of adversity when it comes to what's been going on around this pandemic. And it makes things hard, not only for adults, for kids too, right? Our kids are not immune to this, unfortunately, right? We can't protect them from this. We have to help them to navigate it. The good news is that while we're helping them to navigate, right, the silver lining is that we're helping them to build resilience that they will have for a lifetime. And what is resilience? There are 6 different components of resilience, and some of them play into this emotional awareness and control. You can see that's one of them. Impulse control, that's being able to respond be responsive instead of reactive, right? Like I want to react to that, but I'm not. I'm gonna bite my tongue. I'm gonna put my hands in my pocket, whatever that might be, so that I can be more responsive instead of reactive. Optimism, knowing that things can and will get better. Empathy and connection, always so important in resilience, right? When we are connected, when we are experiencing and being empathetic, we're in our thinking learning brain. We're in the right part of our brain to be a good learner. Self-efficacy, which is having a can-do attitude, a belief in oneself. And then, of course, we have flexible and accurate thinking, right? Who doesn't need that, especially right now? We have to filter what's coming in, right? We have to be able to go, okay, first, maybe I need to adapt to the information I'm getting right now. And I also need to make sure it's accurate, right? That I'm not adapting based on something that's not really happening. Our brain development matters the part of our brain that needs to be mature, that's being worked on, that's being built, where we're connecting, is our prefrontal cortex, which is right here in the very front of our brain, right? It's the most sophisticated part of our brain, and it is the part that is responsible, so to speak, for helping us build and develop and mature with our executive function skills. These are skills such as flexible thinking, emotional control, impulse control, organization, flexible thinking, right? Are you noticing some familiar terms that we just talked about, right? As far as resilience. So when we talk about resilience, we talk about executive function skills, we're talking about that emotional awareness and control, that emotional intelligence, right? That's required. This is the last part of our brain to reach maturity. And we know that it does not actually reach full maturity until about the age of 30, right? And so we know that also that this part of our brain is being built up until the age of 30. Does that mean that none of these skills are actually coming online, so to speak, when we're younger than 30? No, it just means that that part of our brain doesn't reach its full capacity to be really working the way it needs to be until we're about 30. And so these are those skills that we need to learn in order to develop our emotional intelligence. And as I said, brain development matters. So you can see here, this orange piece way in the front is our prefrontal cortex, right? So there's a lot of other pieces of the brain. We've got our cerebellum that controls our motion and our motor impulse, our motion and motor function, coordination, things like that. Then you've got your cerebrum, that big or blue part, which is where we store information, right? Where things get going, and we go back in there and go, hey, where is that? And again, I oversimplify, but for our purposes, it works. And then we've got this hippocampus and amygdala in the middle there, which is the part of our brain that does a couple of things. It protects us from, it signals that we need to protect ourselves from danger. It stores our short-term memory, but while we're waiting to store it as knowledge and long-term memory. And it's kind of our emotion, it's our emotionally triggered part of our brain. It's our emotional brain. And when we're stuck in this emotional brain, we can't get up to our prefrontal cortex, and we have really limited access to our cerebrum. And so we want to make sure, right, that no thinking or learning can happen when we're stuck in that midbrain. We call this our midbrain. And that no learning can happen. There isn't any language capability, right? No real thinking. It's a very reactive, responsive part of our brain. In order to build the skills, in order to create the connections, to build those executive function skills, we need to be able to access that. So we have to stay in our thinking, learning brain. And how do we do that? Well, one of the ways that we do that is through practice and repetition. Actually, it's the primary way that we build emotional awareness and control. We have to practice and teach our brain those skills in order to learn them. So similar to typing or riding a bicycle, you practice, right? You kind of get a feel for it, and then you practice, and then you do it again and again and again. And that's how our brain learns everything, including emotional awareness and control. But as I mentioned, we have to be really connected. We have to feel safe. We have to not be stuck in our emotional brain in order to build emotional awareness and control. And so we need to feel connected. We need to know we belong somewhere. We need to know that the people around us care about how we feel. And that makes us able to stay in that thinking, learning brain and really develop and practice and repeat these skills. So it's twofold, right? We have to practice, we have to have the opportunity to practice, but we also have to make sure we feel comfortable where we are so that we can learn. So we have access to those parts of our brain. So first part of that is self-awareness. So self-awareness means that we get how we're feeling. We understand. It's hard. That's a skill that takes practice, right? To check in with your feelings to know how you're feeling, to be able to communicate it, put a word with it, right? So that we call that self-awareness. And then, so there's a lot of different exercises we can do to learn how to do this, to practice how to do this. We can check in with our feelings, start with a breathing exercise, and then kind of just ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? I highly recommend doing this, something like this, at least before you even get out of bed in the morning. Because sometimes we just wake up a certain kind of way, right? I was talking to a coworker yesterday who said, yeah, I woke up on Monday morning and just went, I don't know why I'm feeling this way, but it doesn't feel good. Like it was a terrible, anxious feeling. And she recognized the sensations in her body. She was able to wait a little bit to see if there's some things she could do to calm it down. And then she said, no, it's kind of taking over right now. Kind of got to roll with it, right? And when you notice those sensations, then you can take care of yourself. You can address them. You can say, today I'm feeling I'm furious. I'm not feeling great. I'm scared, right? Sometimes we wake up in a silly mood. So it doesn't have to be a bad thing, right? You can wake up maybe in kind of a silly mood, but being aware of it, checking in, being aware is one of the first ways that we build that emotional intelligence. And then name it to tame it is really important. When we feel like we are in control, our brain is not stuck in that place where we don't feel safe, because feeling like you're in control helps you to feel a little bit safe. So we say name it to tame it. This is Tina Bryson and Dan Siegel. Love, those are two of my favorite authors. And what they say is we can name how we're feeling so that we can tame how we're feeling, right? We can tame those emotions. So put a name to it, figure it out, use those emojis, use words, use flashcards, use whatever it is that helps you to talk about and name how you're feeling. And that again, beginning of emotional intelligence, gets you started understanding how you feel when we can name it. Because feelings can be really overwhelming and confusing. The other couple of weeks ago on one of these calls, a mom said, wait a minute, so my kid can feel two emotions at the same time? Yeah, don't we all? And sometimes more than that, right? Many, many emotions at the same time. And it can be really confusing. And especially when you're a younger person who hasn't had very much experience figuring out how you're feeling and feeling and feeling overwhelmed and not knowing what to do with that. But when we give it a name, when we name what we're feeling, it helps us to integrate our brain. So all those parts of our brain can work together, and then we have less reactivity, right? We don't have that. We're not reacting. We're actually able to be thoughtful about what we're going to do. And that's the goal, right? That's emotional intelligence. That's self-control. Sometimes our kids especially cannot tell us how they're feeling. And so we can ask them to show us, right? I love emojis for that reason. There's a lot of different graphics that you can use. Hang it on the refrigerator. If your kids come in and go, I don't know, I'm feeling a certain kind of way, or if you notice their behavior is letting you know that they're feeling something, you can just say, hey, point to the picture that tells me, right? So we can start putting a word to it. And that's a beginning of a conversation. What we want to do is normalize talking about feelings, right? Being able to say, I feel a certain kind of way, which is making me behave in a certain kind of way. Let's figure out what it is so that we can address the behavior, right? We can figure out a different way to behave. We can be curious with our kids and ask them, gosh, it seems to me maybe that you're feeling a little bit uncomfortable because you have to wear a mask all day at school. Is that how you're feeling? Talk to me. Let's talk about that, right? Or I wonder if you're feeling this way. Or you can ask questions like, what was it like for you? Okay, so tell me what it's like for you. What part of that is uncomfortable? And when we start talking about that kind of stuff, to use the mask as an example, maybe what it is literally I'm uncomfortable. Like maybe this mask just doesn't work for me, right? We all find different masks that feel the most comfortable. So when we talk about that, we can fix that. That's easily fixable, right? We can get a different mask. Let's figure that out. But we start with, what are you feeling? Right? Talk to me about how you're feeling. Or you can ask them, okay, so what does it mean that you are, that you don't feel like you want to go to school? Or what does it mean that you're telling me that, that you don't want to talk right now, right? How can I help you? Come home and talk to you about something, and you can ask them, well, gosh, that sounds like it was rough. How did you handle that? Right? And get them talking about what they did and what their thought process was, right? It's like a window into their little brains. How did you handle that? What did you do? Why did you do it that way? And then maybe they need some thought about how they could handle it better next time. And so you can say, how else could you have handled that? And again, that gets the conversation going and gets them to start talking about problem solving for themselves, which starts to bring them up into that prefrontal cortex and develop that part of their brain. When we ask them questions like that, they actually are learning. We actually learn more when we problem solve, and especially when even if we've made a mistake, right? Because then we go back and it's more poignant. It makes more sense to us. We actually are building those neural pathways rather than something that we just hear or we're told, which is why asking questions and drawing kids out is so important, right? Because they can then problem solve on their own. They can practice being problem solvers. And that's what we need them to do in order to be effective problem solvers. Empathy is so important when you are talking about this stuff, right? The elements of empathy are that we are seeing their world. We're putting ourselves in their shoes, right? Whether it be our kids or anyone else that we interact with. Like, look at a situation through someone else's eyes, understand their feelings. Understanding feelings doesn't mean that we agree with the way they handled something, with their attitude, with their opinion, whatever it is, but just understand that they have feelings and accept those feelings non-judgmentally, right? That's your feeling about this, and that's okay. You get to have your feelings. And then we can communicate understanding. I hear you, I get you, right? Because empathy is really helping the other person to feel felt, right? Like, I get you, right? Some of the things that we can say is, I get you, I understand. Doesn't mean I agree. I understand is different than I agree, right? Or you can say, I see why you feel this way. I understand that you feel a certain kind of way. And I can see from your perspective why you might feel that way, why you do feel that way, right? When we exhibit that kind of empathy, when we share that kind of a connection with another person, especially when it's our child, first thing it does is it's disarming, right? You're now not going head to head. You're now not engaging in a conflict. You're not trying to change someone's thoughts. You're not dismissing their feelings. You're just saying, I get you, which is calming, right? So much different than saying, well, I just think you're wrong. Right away, you've started an argument. We're all in the midbrain. We're all triggered, and we're going to go with an argument, right? Versus, yep, I can see why you felt that way. Makes you feel connected. And that's a way that we can connect is through empathy, right? Is through saying, I'm willing to take the time to understand why you feel that way. I get it, okay? And then when that's the beginning to being able to navigate our own feelings with our kids, right? And when we can navigate our own feelings, when we can express them and be heard and feel like other people understand that we are having feelings, it's empowering. It makes us feel strong. It helps us to be able to further communicate other feelings, right? And so that's empowering. And when we feel empowered, when we feel safe, that's the beginning of self-regulation. So that when I feel a certain kind of way, I can say, if I'm feeling really mad or really mean, or if I'm feeling like just frustrated or worried, I can say, I know what I need to do to take care of myself, right? That's self-regulation. Being able to identify and verbalize those big feelings, that's the first step. The other thing about self-regulation is that we have to be able to engage in self-regulation. We have to be calm in order to help our children calm their storm. It's so hard because being a parent can be so triggering. There are so many behaviors that can trigger feelings in us that cause us to feel dysregulated, that help us to feel like we're not calm anymore. We're now in a storm because our kids are behaving in a certain kind of way that kind of, we use the word trigger, right? That trigger us. So it's really hard to be that calm. But when our calm meets their storm, we can both get to a place of calm. And that's when we can start to problem solve, right? That's when we can start to figure out what are we going to do next. So this is a cute graphic because there are so many ways to help build self-regulation. A calm down area, right? Or maybe not even a calm down area, maybe a calm down item, right? Does your child feel better when they can hug a pillow? Does your child feel better when they can go outside for a walk? When they do a breathing technique, right? Maybe they want to write in a journal or play some games that'll help self-regulate them. They probably have their own coping strategies, right? We start to recognize very young what helps our kids to self-regulate. Maybe it's music. Maybe it's going for a walk. Maybe it's a cuddle. Maybe it's being left on their own for a few minutes to just calm down and relax without any stimulation. You start to watch and recognize, and then ask, what can I do? Right? Ask, what helps you calm down? Tell me what helps you calm down. Maybe they don't know. Maybe they can't verbalize it the first time you ask the question, but it definitely can get them thinking, right? And if they say, I don't know, then you might say, well, I have noticed that this might be something that calms you down. And then you can mention that. Or you can say, hey, think about it and get back to me, right? Let me know if there's something that helps you calm down. Ask them. That's empowering too. And that gets their brains thinking and gets all that working together. Motivation is the ability, the feeling like I want to do something, right? Parents tend to sometimes think that this is motivation. Right? I know that I've said this so many times. Why do I have to get angry before anything happens around here? Right? Why do I have to yell before people clean up their room? Why do I have to get so mad before, right? But that's not motivation. That's just now I'm scared and you're making me, right? That's not intrinsically motivating. Nagging, also not intrinsically motivating. That's not going to work either, right? It just doesn't, that's not intrinsic motivation. Intrinsic motivation is I feel motivated. I feel like I'm ready to engage in this behavior. I'm ready to do this task. And sometimes we have to be creative about motivation, right? Yelling or demanding is not always the best way to instill that. We can be motivating maybe by playing a game. We can be motivating maybe by, giving up control. Often all we need to do is to say, hey, your room needs to be picked up. I need it done by 4 o'clock. Talk to me about when you're going to do this, right? It's not always going to work. I'm not saying that's going to, solve everybody's dirty room problems, but it will start that process of turning that over to your child. Right. And then we give them the control. They feel like, okay, well, I'll have it done by 4. And then so what's your plan to get it done by 4? Right. Whatever that might be, we have to give them that motivation, give them the help that they need to get motivated. Because we can't teach a child to behave better by making them feel bad. Children behave better when they feel better, right? So if we can stay connected when we're helping them with their behavior, when we can look below the surface and understand that behavior is communication, then this will start to work better, right? You'll develop a better working rhythm with your child. All right, so when our kids are kind of dysregulated, what are some other things that we can do to help them to develop emotional intelligence? One is to give them the power to let you know, this is how I'm feeling right now, and this is what I need. right? So maybe that give me a minute. Let me just, you're kind of, you're having a hard moment. You're overwhelmed by big feelings. I see you. So they're seen. I'm going to give you a minute. Maybe you can do a breathing exercise. Maybe you need to just sit quietly. Maybe you need to cuddle the pillow or the teddy bear. I'm going to give you that minute, right? The other thing is to listen non-judgmentally, to use those empathy statements, right? That will help them to feel and connected and safe. And then the last thing is we can be soothing. Soothing doesn't necessarily mean that we are going to cuddle and hug. But just saying, I get it. I understand, right? Here are some other soothing things that we can say. I can see that you're having a hard time. I'm here for you. I care about how you feel. I'll stay with you. It's okay to feel angry. It's okay to feel frustrated. It's okay to feel sad. And then I love you even when you're at your worst, right? There's nothing you can do that's going to stop how much I love you. That's going to change how much I love you. And when we feel connected like that, that helps to build our own emotional intelligence. Because by using these statements, we're also modeling. Which is how our kids learn the best, is from modeling. And so when we model this behavior, our kids learn that they can be empathetic with others. They can be empathetic with themselves. So leading with that. We also can help our kids be curious, right? Part of teaching our kids how to be curious is to not always give them the answers, right? It's like, come to ask us a question. Is this a question that I need to answer? Or is this a question that I can help lead them in the direction to find their own answer? That's how we're building those prefrontal cortex skills. Curiosity, figuring it out on your own, right? Which means it has to be child-driven and unmanaged by us. Oh my gosh, as a mom, I have a 25-year-old daughter and a 28-year-old son. And I will tell you, the unmanaged part is so hard for me because I want to manage every little piece of everything. Even now, as they're entering this adulthood time of their lives, right? This young adulthood, I still want to manage their behavior. I still want to tell them, I don't think that purchase is a great, okay, you already did it. Like it's hard. It's really hard. I'm a manager. I want to manage them, but they can't learn unless they've experienced their own mistakes, right? So I have to back up and let them figure it out because that's the only way they're going to develop those prefrontal cortex skills. Has to be a little bit risky, a little bit intrinsic. It has to come from inside. Curiosity is open-ended. There's no beginning, middle, or end to it. It's usually curiosity comes from something that's a little bit unusual. And also think about the kind of curiosity that you might have when you're alone, right? You start thinking, you start figuring things out. You have that opportunity. So solitude is kind of important in curiosity. The other thing we can ask our kids is, what would be helpful right now? Right? When they come to us and ask a question, or when they present to us a challenge that they're experiencing, one of the things we can say to them, what do you need from me right now? Do you want me to help you figure this out? Do you want me to just be a listener right now? Tell me what would be helpful. Oftentimes, our kids just want us to use us as a sounding board, right? To be able to bounce the idea off of us. Sometimes you need that safe person to just be able to talk it out, right? By yourself. So how many of you, I'm sure many of you, have experienced that very thing where you start talking it out loud and then all of a sudden as you're hearing it come out of your own mouth, you go, okay, yeah, I don't have to finish that because I figured it out. Just saying it out loud helps you. And sometimes that's all our kids need, is for us to be silent, right? There's a lot of power in us in being silent. It helps our kids to learn, to build that emotional intelligence. Because we do all learn, we long to be heard. People come alive when we listen. They come alive when they feel seen and heard and valued. We all have this intrinsic need to feel seen, heard, and valued. And when we can do that for our kids, we are giving them a tremendous gift. Our social skills are another part of emotional intelligence. And some of the things that we can do to help our kids develop social skills which has been particularly difficult over the last 18 months, right? Our kids have been kind of separated from people. They're back with people now, but it's still a little bit different, maybe, and a little bit awkward. So developing those social skills is gonna be still be a little bit challenging for many of our kids, right? Especially if they've started a new school without ending in the other school, and things are really different now. So helping them to develop those social skills, follow their interests. Maybe they want to, they're interested in an art class, don't sign them up for Little League, and vice versa. Follow their interests. One of the hardest things to do as a parent, I think, is to let our kids have their own interests, right? We tend to, not all of us, but many of us tend to have an idea in our head of who and what our kids are going to be. And we kind of forget that we need to listen to who they actually are and let them decide who they are and what they're going to be. So follow their interests in helping them out with putting them in social situations, like activities, etc. Teach them to ask questions. So often we talk to people who don't ever stop to say, oh, I'm sorry, and how are you? Or what's been going on with you, right? Teach our kids to ask questions. That every relationship is serve and return, which means that I talk, you listen, and then we take turns. Now you talk and I listen, right? That serve and return, which is the part of listening skills. If your kids are having a hard time socially right now, it's okay to role play with them. All right, I'll be your friend and you be you, and let's practice inviting that friend over for a play date. Or let's practice inviting that friend to play a game on the playground, right? Whatever it might be, role play it. Help your child to practice, because when we practice, we're developing those skills in our own brain, so that when we go to actually do it, we already have those pathways, right? We already have the messages built in. We know what to do. We can go in there and grab it and use it, right? Rather than trying for the first time. Teach our kids to share and take turns, which is, again, in this time of over the last 18 months, depending on how old your children are, that might be a skill that they didn't really get the opportunity to practice with their playmates, their classmates. Perhaps maybe they have with their siblings, but some kids didn't have that opportunity. Sharing and taking turns also means you're going to be flexible. Okay, you want to play that, I don't want to play that, but let's negotiate. Let's figure this out. I'll play handball with you for the first half of recess, if you'll play soccer with me for the second half of recess, or whatever it might be. Which is also comes into respecting personal space, team building exercises. Again, I can't say empathy enough. You know me, I'm just going to keep saying empathy. We have to role model those social skills, so they need to see us doing all of these things. And then know your child's limits, right? If you have a child who social interaction is really hard for them, back up and say, okay, maybe an hour play date is enough, and we don't need a 4-hour play date, right? My son is a child who was a child, and still kind of isn't as an adult now, has limits to how long he can handle a social situation, right? He has social anxiety, and that is hard for him. And so being able to say, okay, I'm done now. Like, I have to go home. Or maybe he was just in a friend's wedding. And of course, you know how weddings are, a lot of activity around these weddings. And he was like, yeah, I need to go home. I can't spend the night because I need me time, right? That's more than I can handle. So I'll come to the dinner, I'll hang out with you guys for a little while afterwards, but I'm going to go home to my own bed, right? And that was him setting boundaries and knowing his own limits. But so we can help our kids to develop those limits and those needs and be okay with it. It's okay. You don't have to do exactly everything the way everybody else does it. Know your own personal limits. So those are just some ideas for developing social skills, some thoughts for developing some social skills. Okay, next up is a breathing exercise that I really enjoy. And I think it's really great for helping our brain to know what we want to believe. what we want to do next, right? We can tell our brain what we want and need. We're in control of how we think. We're in control of what we do, right? So a mantra is something that tells us what we want. A mantra is a statement that we can use to build a belief about ourselves. And that might be something like, I am ready to get to work. And it might be something like, I am calm, I am peaceful, I am smart, right? And that's a mantra. So before we get started with this exercise, I'm going to ask you to choose your mantra. I am, and then fill in the blank. Maybe it's calm. Maybe it's peaceful. Maybe it's excited. Maybe it's ready to work. Whatever it might be. I am enough, right? So just think about that for a second. I'm gonna take a sip of my tea while you think about what your mantra is going to be. And I'm going to lead you through this breathing exercise using your mantra. The mantra I'm going to use is calm. So you can join me in calm while you do this exercise, or you can use your own mantra. If you want to say it aloud, please do, if you feel comfortable doing that. If not, it's okay to just breathe it. So the first thing I'm going to ask you to do is just sit comfortably with your hands maybe covering your heart, right? If you feel comfortable doing that, put your hands over your heart. Breathe a little bit for a moment. Notice your breathing. And then I'm going to ask you to inhale through your nose. And as you inhale through your nose, I want you to think to yourself, I am. And then as you exhale through your nose, that should say through your mouth, finish your thought with the word that you chose. I am calm. Breathe in, I am, and exhale, calm. One more time. As you breathe in, you're going to say, I am. And as you exhale through your mouth, you're going to say the word of your choice. Calm, peaceful, ready, enough. You can repeat that as many times as you need in order to feel calm, or in order to feel ready, or in order to feel like you're like enough, right? Like you're ready, like you're ready to stop, you're ready to move on. And that's from a new resource that I recently found called Challenge to Change. And it's from their Just Breathe collection. So if you are interested in looking that up, you can just look up Challenge to Change on the internet. And as my father-in-law would say, Google it up, and you can take a look at their resources. But sit with your mantra today. Choose a mantra. Maybe you want to have a mantra of the day. Maybe you want to have a mantra of the week. Maybe you need a mantra of the hour, because the way things are changing right now, right? Whatever that might be, try to hold on to that mantra. Maybe you want to write it down. Maybe you want to encourage your children to write it down. If they're struggling with something right now, help them to have the belief about themselves, right? Help them to have that belief. Write it down on a Post-it note, stick it on your computer or on the bathroom mirror. Or maybe you want to have some fun and write it on the bathroom mirror with a dry erase or something like that, lipstick, who knows. But yeah, work with those mantras. I'm going to really encourage you to work with those mantras, because being calm and believing in yourself helps us to build that emotional intelligence. And then it also helps us to be able to respond instead of react, right? We want to be responsive. We want to be thoughtful, right? Being responsive implies that we've thought about what we want to do next. Reacting means that we haven't even thought about it. We're just quick reacting, right? We want to be thoughtful in our parenting. We want to be thoughtful in our friendships and our other relationships, right? So emotional intelligence helps us to get there. So thank you very much. If you haven't clicked on that URL, do, the one that's in the chat, and 3104 is the number of the course. If you have any questions, you are always welcome to reach out to me. If you would like further information or further resources, you are always welcome to reach out to me. And thank you for joining us. Elizabeth, I'm going to turn it back over to you.